You ever have one of those moments where time just seems to stop, where the world tilts on its axis and you realize that everything you thought was safe is actually hanging by a thread? For me, that moment didn't happen in a war zone or during a natural disaster. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning in September, sitting on a weathered wooden dock with a fishing rod in my hand, watching a woman in a bright pink blazer drive a 20-ton bulldozer through my front gate. "This is public land. You have no right to block community access," she screamed over the roar of the diesel engine, her voice cracking with the kind of self-righteous fury that only a homeowners association president can summon. Watching as 20 years of memories, the iron gate my father welded with his own hands, the concrete posts we poured together one sweaty summer, crumbled into dust and twisted metal under the steel blade of that machine. She thought she was reclaiming a walking path for the neighborhood, or at least that's the lie she told herself. But what she didn't know as she sat high up in that cab, looking down at me like I was a squatter on my own property, was that I wasn't just a fisherman holding a rod. I was a man with a deed dating back to 1987, security cameras recording her every move from 3 different angles, and a lawyer who was already awake and waiting for my call. My name is Ethan Rutherford, and if you've ever had someone try to take what's yours just because they thought they had a little bit of power, then you're going to want to pull up a chair for this one, because before this was over, that bulldozer wouldn't be the only thing wrecking lives in Pinehurst Meadows. It started the way all the best bad days do, with absolute peace. I was out on the dock by 6 a.m., coffee in a thermos, watching the mist rise off the water of the 4.7-acre lake my dad left me. It's a special place, tucked away behind a thick line of pines, the kind of spot where the only noise you usually hear is the splash of a bass or the wind in the trees. I remember looking at the water, smooth as glass, thinking about how my dad used to sit right here, baiting hooks with his calloused hands, telling me, "Ethan, land isn't just dirt, it's memory, and you fight for memory." I had just hooked a decent-sized bass, feeling that familiar tug on the line, when the sound cut through the air, a low, mechanical grumble that grew louder and louder until it was shaking the planks under my feet. It wasn't a delivery truck, and it wasn't a neighbor mowing their lawn. It was the distinct, aggressive roar of heavy machinery. I stood up, rod still in hand, and looked toward the gravel access road just in time to see a bright yellow Caterpillar D6 bulldozer crest the small hill. It looked massive, out of place, like a tank rolling into a playground, and behind the controls, gripping the levers with white-knuckled intensity, was Karen Whitmore. Now, I've known Karen for a few years. She's the HOA president of the subdivision that borders my land, the kind of woman who measures grass height with a ruler and leaves notes on your windshield if you park 3 inches too far from the curb. But I had never seen her like this. She wasn't just annoyed. She was on a mission. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I set my fishing rod down gently, pulled out my phone, and started recording. My other hand drifted naturally to my hip, where my Glock 19 was holstered under my jacket. Not because I wanted to use it, God knows I didn't, but because when a multi-ton machine is being driven by someone in a rage, you prepare for the worst. September 9th, 2023, 8:42 a.m. I said into the microphone, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Karen Whitmore is operating heavy machinery on my private property without permission. She didn't slow down. She accelerated. The blade hit the iron gate with a screech that sounded like a car wreck, metal shearing and twisting, the concrete posts popping out of the ground like pulled teeth. I watched the gate, the one my dad and I painted green back in '98, fold inward and collapse under the tracks. It was violent, it was loud, and it was heartbreaking. When the dust settled, she killed the engine and climbed down, smoothing her pink blazer as if she had just parked a sedan at the grocery store instead of demolishing private property. She marched up to the wreckage, pointed a manicured finger at me, and shouted, "This is community land. You have been blocking legal access for months. You have ignored every warning." I just stood there, phone held high, recording the red flush on her neck, the way her eyes darted around looking for an audience. "I have a deed from 1987, I said, my voice cutting through the ringing silence. "I have a survey from 1986. This land is mine. It has never been public. And you just caused about $12,000 in damage." She laughed, a sharp, dismissive bark. My attorneys have the real survey, she sneered, looking at my holster with disdain. And if you don't open this path, we will take further action. You'll be hearing from Mr. Rutherford. She climbed back into the dozer, reversed it over the ruins of my gate, grinding the iron into the gravel, and drove away, leaving me standing in a cloud of diesel fumes and concrete dust. I walked back to the dock and sat down. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump of watching your heritage get smashed to pieces. I picked up the fishing lure my dad gave me, rubbing the silver paint with my thumb, and I made a call to Ben Hargrove. Ben isn't just my lawyer. He's an old friend, the kind of guy who wears three-piece suits but isn't afraid to get mud on his shoes if the case calls for it. He specializes in property disputes, and when I told him what happened, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Did you get it on video?" he asked, his voice dead calm. "Every second," I said. "Plus the security cams." "Do not engage," Ben said. "Do not post it. Do not talk to her. I'll be there in 90 minutes. We aren't going to sue her, Ethan. Not yet. We are going to bury her." When Ben arrived, he brought 2 banker boxes of files and a look of grim determination. We sat at my kitchen table, spreading out documents like generals planning a war. We had the original deed, stamped and notarized in 1987. We had the survey maps. We had everything that proved Karen was wrong. But Ben, being Ben, wasn't satisfied with just proving I was right. He wanted to know why she was so wrong. He pulled up the email Karen had sent to the neighborhood a few weeks prior, the one accusing me of stealing land. Attached to it was a survey map I'd never seen before, bearing the logo of Green Line Surveyors. "I've never heard of Green Line," Ben muttered, typing furiously on his laptop. He pulled up the Secretary of State's business registry, and within 30 seconds, the color drained from his face. "Ethan, look at this." Green Line Surveyors had been registered just 18 months ago. It had no licensed surveyors on staff. And the registered owner? Richard Whitmore, Karen's husband. "She didn't just find a bad survey," Ben said, looking at me over his glasses. "They made one. This is forgery. This is fraud." We spent the rest of the afternoon digging. We reviewed my security footage and found something that made my skin crawl. A black SUV that had been driving past my gate slowly, stopping every time, taking pictures. It had been happening for weeks before the first violation letter ever arrived. Someone was casing the property. Ben zoomed in on the license plate. It was blurry, but we could make out enough to know it wasn't Karen's car. It was corporate. "This isn't about a walking path," Ben said, leaning back in his chair. "You don't forge a survey and bulldoze a gate for a nature trail. Someone wants this land, Ethan, and there's big money behind it." As the sun went down, casting long shadows over the lake, I realized I wasn't just fighting a neighbor. I was fighting a conspiracy. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Karen didn't stop at the bulldozer. On Monday, I got a certified letter fining me $500 a day for violating Community Resolution 12B, a resolution that didn't exist, applied to a property that wasn't in the HOA. By Tuesday, the neighbors stopped waving. I'd walk into the local hardware store and feel the eyes on me, the whispers. Ray Coleman, a retired sheriff who lived 3 doors down and was one of the few good ones, came over one evening with a printed screenshot from the neighborhood Facebook group. "She's painting you as a lunatic," Ray said, tossing the paper on the table. It was a photo of my ruined gate, cropped to make it look like I had destroyed it in a fit of rage, with a caption warning families to stay away from the unstable individual at the lake. "She's trying to isolate you," Ray said, pouring himself a coffee. "If everyone hates you, no one asks questions when she takes the land. Let them talk," I said, filing the screenshot into the evidence folder. "Every lie she tells is just another nail in the coffin." Then came the vandalism. A white van rolled by in the middle of the night, and someone hurled red paint all over my mailbox, spray painting "Get Out" on the wooden post. It was visceral, ugly, the kind of thing meant to make you feel unsafe in your own bed. My cameras caught the van, and with some digital enhancement, we made out the logo on the side. Hillside Equipment Rental. The same place Karen rented the bulldozer. But the breaking point, the moment this stopped being a legal battle and became a personal crusade, happened on September 26th. I walked down to the lake early in the morning, coffee in hand, expecting to see the sunrise reflecting off the water. Instead, I saw death. The water along the shoreline was cloudy, milky white, and bobbing on the surface were hundreds of fish. Bass, bluegill, and right there near the dock, floating on its side, was the 24-pound catfish I'd been catching and releasing for 6 years. I fell to my knees, touching the cold, stiff body of that fish, and I felt a rage so pure and white-hot that it terrified me. This wasn't just property damage. This was murder of an ecosystem. I called the EPA immediately. The inspector, a guy named Gerald who looked like he'd seen it all, tested the water and looked at me with sad eyes. Sodium hypochlorite, he said. Industrial bleach. Someone dumped gallons of it. It's going to take months to clear this up, Ethan. Everything in here is dead. I went back to the house and scrubbed the security footage until my eyes burned. And there it was. 2:47 a.m. A gray Dodge Ram pickup truck. 2 men in ski masks dumping containers into the water. But they made a mistake. They didn't cover the license plate well enough. Infrared cut through the mud, giving us the last 3 digits, 748. Ray Coleman made one call to an old buddy at the DMV. 20 minutes later, we had a match. The truck was registered to Whitmore Realty Services, Karen's brokerage. She had poisoned my lake. She had killed my father's legacy because I wouldn't sell. Ben, Ray, and I turned my dining room into a war room. We had a whiteboard covered in timelines, photos, and strings connecting the players. We knew Karen was the muscle, and Richard was the forger, but who was the money? Who was pushing them this hard? Ben found the answer in a leaked email database, something publicly available if you knew where to look. He found an email chain between Karen and a man named James Brennan. Brennan was the director of acquisitions for Horizon Realty Group, a massive commercial developer out of Seattle. The emails were damning. Horizon wanted my lake for a luxury condo project. They needed the land secured by October 30th to meet their permitting deadline. And there was a letter of intent. If Karen secured the property for $1.8 million, she would get a commission of $270,000. That's the motive, Ben said, taping the email to the whiteboard. She's broke, her husband is bankrupt, and she sees a $250,000 payday if she can just scare you off the land before Halloween. She poisoned the lake to lower the value. I realized the sickness rising in my throat. She wanted to make it a liability, so I'd sell cheap. Exactly, Ben said. She's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. We had enough for a lawsuit, sure, but Ben had a better idea. We don't just sue her, he said. We go to the HOA meeting on October 28th. She's required to chair it. We present the evidence to the entire community. We let them see exactly who has been leading them. It was a gamble, walking into the lion's den, but I wanted her to look me in the eye when her world fell apart. The night of the meeting, the community center was packed. 89 people crammed into a room meant for 60. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Karen stood at the podium, wearing a burgundy blazer, looking every bit the confident leader. She had the fake green line survey projected on the screen behind her. As you can see, she was saying, pointing a laser at the screen, Mr. Rutherford is illegally blocking community land. We have tried to be reasonable. We have tried to be neighborly. But he has responded with hostility. I sat in the back row with Ben and Ray, just watching, waiting. When she finished her opening remarks and moved to call for a vote on new sanctions against me, Ben stood up. He didn't shout. He just walked down the center aisle, briefcase in hand, looking like the wrath of God in a tailored suit. "Excuse me, Mrs. Whitmore," Ben said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I have a procedural question." "You aren't a resident," Karen snapped. "Sit down or leave." "Actually," Ben said, smiling that shark-like lawyer's smile. "Under Washington state law, a property owner involved in an enforcement dispute has the right to legal representation at any meeting where that dispute is discussed. And I submitted notice 72 hours ago." He plugged his laptop into the projector system before she could stop him. The screen flickered, and the fake survey disappeared. In its place appeared my original 1987 deed, stamped, notarized, and undeniable. "This is the real deed," Ben said. "And this." He clicked a button, and the screen changed to the business registry for Green Line Surveyors. "This is the company that created the map you just saw, owned by Richard Whitmore. No licensed surveyors. Just a shell company created to steal land." The room went deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Karen's face went from confident to ghostly pale in seconds. "And why would she do this?" Ben asked the room. Why forge documents? Why bulldoze a gate? He clicked again. The email from James Brennan appeared. The $270,000 commission. The October 30th deadline. She wasn't doing this for you, Ben said, turning to face the crowd. She was doing it for a paycheck. She tried to sell your community's integrity for a commission. Then came the videos. The bulldozer crushing the gate. The white van spraying the paint. And finally, the gray Dodge Ram dumping bleach into the lake. When the footage of the fish dying played, people in the audience actually gasped. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. This wasn't an administrative dispute anymore. This was evil. Mrs. Whitmore, Ben said, turning to face her. You have committed forgery, destruction of property, environmental terrorism, and extortion. The Pine County prosecutor has the full file. Karen stood there, gripping the podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She tried to speak, tried to stammer out some excuse about misunderstandings and property values, but Ray Coleman stood up from the back. Karen, Ray said, his voice booming with that old sheriff authority. Stop talking. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. She looked at the crowd, people she had lied to, people she had turned against me, and saw no sympathy, only shock and anger. She grabbed her laptop, shoved past Ben, and ran out the side door. The silence she left behind was heavy. Then, Henry Dalton, a neighbor who had lived there as long as I had, stood up slowly. I moved to suspend Karen Whitmore immediately, he said. Seconded, someone shouted. The vote was unanimous. I walked out into the cool October air, watching Karen's taillights disappear down the road. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. But it was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes after you finish a job that needed doing. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. We didn't just get her fired, we dismantled her life. Karen pleaded guilty to criminal mischief, environmental damage, and attempted extortion. She got an 18-month suspended sentence, 240 hours of community service, and, here's the kicker, a $135,000 fine from the EPA for the lake. Her real estate license? Revoked. Whitmore Realty filed for bankruptcy. Richard, her husband, got fined $50,000 and banned from surveying for 15 years. As for Horizon Realty and James Brennan, they didn't escape either. Ben filed a civil suit naming them as co-conspirators. They settled out of court for $320,000 just to keep it quiet. Brennan resigned in disgrace 2 days later. With the settlement money, after paying Ben, who earned every penny, I had enough to restore the lake. It took 4 months of filtration and treatment, but the water cleared. I restocked the fish. And at the entrance to my property, I built a new gate. Not just iron this time, but reinforced steel with custom stonework. I mounted a bronze plaque on the center pillar. It reads, Frank Rutherford Memorial Gate, Justice Restored. The neighborhood changed after that. The new HOA board, led by Henry Dalton, issued a formal apology. Neighbors who used to avoid me started waving again, some even stopping by to apologize personally. They realized they had been pawns in a game they didn't know they were playing. I still sit on that dock every morning. The fishing isn't quite what it used to be. It'll take years for the bass to get big again, but the piece is back. And that's the thing about bullies, whether they're running a playground or an HOA. They rely on you being quiet. They rely on you being scared. They rely on you thinking that their power is real. But power without truth is just a bulldozer with no fuel. It looks scary, but it isn't going anywhere. My dad was right. Land is memory. And protecting it meant standing up not just for the dirt, but for the truth. So, I have to ask you guys, what would you have done? Would you have drawn that gun when the bulldozer hit the gate? Would you have waited like I did? Or would you have taken a different path entirely? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for what's yours against someone who thought they could take it, share your story. Because the only way we stop the next Karen is by shining a light on the last one. Thanks for watching. And remember, good fences make good neighbors, but good lawyers make sure you keep the fence. Stay safe out there.